Well, hi, everyone. Welcome to Dealmakers Table, the healthcare series. And I have the unique pleasure to have Marc Azoulay on the podcast today. So, Marc, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, happy to be a part of it.
That's great. So, going through your background and your history, introduction to your journey here and into healthcare and helping men in terms of their mental health, right? You're the founder and CEO of Men's Therapy Online, which you grew out of your private practice. Can you share a little bit about your background in therapy since 2013 and what inspired you to specifically focus on men's health through this virtual platform?
Yeah, for sure. So like a lot of psychotherapists, I was a client of psychotherapy, right? Therapy really helped me. I was really lost a lot in college. Very long story short, had a bit of a rough and tumble childhood, got to college and just started doing as many drugs and drinking as much as possible. Really like self-sabotage, self-destructed. It was not a good scene. Culminated in a overdose my summer of my sophomore year. And at that point, I got into therapy as a client. I, used some of the school services that were available. I also pivoted my career, my education away. I was doing computer science, and I moved to neuroscience. So I was interested in studying psychology at that point. I then went on to go to grad school at Naropa University, which is like a Buddhist university, and studied mindfulness for about 3 years. Because that was a big part of my recovery and sobriety journey, was kind of doing it through a Buddhist lens and a spiritual lens, and just trying to be present. So much drug and alcohol was making me not present. So I was like, okay, I need to like just sit down, shut up, and see what the hell's going on. I started working after that in a lot of substance abuse recovery. I worked in the jail system in Boulder County. I worked in drug court for a while. I worked at a substance abuse treatment center, an IOP program, and then eventually started my private practice. And I found what a lot of guys are suffering from is not like the substance abuse stuff is important, but that's often a symptom. There's often something deeper. And what I found a lot of men are suffering with is a lack of who they are, a lack of masculinity, a lack of sense of self. I and a lot of my generation, the millennials, are what we like to call nice guys, where we're kind of like people pleasing, and we are kind of out of touch with being a man in many ways. We don't want to step on anybody's toes. We don't want to be a predator. We don't want to be a creep. We don't want to be a weirdo. We get all these messages about what not to be, but we didn't really get any messages about what to be. And we look to the older generation, and there's not a lot of good role models there, So I think a lot of guys are lost. So, I kind of pivoted my private practice, and now, Men's Therapy Online, this greater platform that I've built, to really working with men, and specifically having men providers working with men clients, because I really do think we have to do this on our own in a way. And we have to learn from older men that can be role models about what it means to be a man and be a healthy man in this world.
Absolutely. It's very interesting navigating, the social norms and things that, the past as well and into the future. So, when we talked, you mentioned scaling the practice so you can help more men, right, in your practice and their mental health and well-being. It's partially driven, by a desire to spend more time and emotional bandwidth with your family, like you mentioned, being present, and move beyond, a glass ceiling that you're hitting of hourly wages with corporations or private practice. How has that personal motivation shaped your approach to building, men's therapy online?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, there's a lot of different factors there. I think, people listening, if they're solo practitioners or yeah, they work in a group practice, like, you can raise your rate, but there is a glass ceiling there. And we are ultimately trading time for money, just how many hourly sessions that you can do. I think a lot of healthcare providers, including myself, we can get burnt out, frankly, and dealing with tough emotional stuff, it's like, if you look at it, you're like, okay, I'm going to work like 40 hours a week and I'm going to get paid, I charge $200 an hour. I'm going to pay $200 an hour. Okay, that's a pretty decent salary. But that's not really what it is. I'm not seeing 40 hours a week of clients, right? I'm seeing maybe 15 to 20 hours a week of clients, and the rest is, dealing with admin or just recovering from doing that work. And if you're a doctor or you are a physical therapist or you're a masseuse or anything where you're using your body and your mind and your heart, like that stuff takes a toll. And I've noticed, I'm a new father now, that I would come home after work some days and just be completely blanked out, just completely just wanting to just like veg in front of the TV or play a video game or just sit in a dark room and not hear or talk to anything. And I don't want to be that for my wife and my kid, I really frankly don't want to be giving all of my emotional bandwidth to people that are not my family, and having a kid has really clarified that. I will probably always keep a small practice because I think staying in the work is important to stay humble and stay grounded, and I do like it to some extent. But I'm actually finding a lot of the admin, the gaminess of it, the marketing, stuff like this show, getting out there and talking and sharing my experience. Learning about different online platforms and AI tools and strategies, like that's fun for me, and underneath it all, like I mentioned, I majored in computer science. Like I'm a nerd. Like I like video games. I like Dungeons and Dragons, sci-fi stuff. I played World of Warcraft. It's very much like a game in a lot of ways. To learn business and to figure out optimal strategies and to try different things, and it feels a lot more creative than some of the work that I do with my clients, which has it served its time, but I've been doing it for about 15 years now, and it can, I'm definitely hitting a wall with the novelty of it. So yeah, both for enjoyment and to be scalable, and like you mentioned, to be with my family more. That's why I'm really trying to build this business into something different out there.
Oh, that's great. And that kind of naturally leads ourselves into, kind of the theme for the podcast is rethinking, telehealth and virtual care, and, going to that business side of, the business that you're running, the core business. So with, the theme is, rethinking telehealth, a fresh approach to virtual care in hospitals and healthcare, right? Healthcare in general. So from your perspective, what are some of the traditional limitations or misconceptions about healthcare, especially in mental health, right? That you're actively trying to address with your men's therapy online. And I can think of one off the top of my head is, the stigma, right? Everyone still has a stigma with mental health issues. So I don't want to, steal your thunder here, Mark, but I know that that's still, a stumbling block for a lot of people even to admit, hey, I need some help here. You know?
Yes, yeah. I can talk about that. I got a few other ones too. But yeah, the stigma is big, especially with men, right? Like I think, I'd say for better or for worse, probably mostly for better. I think during COVID, a lot of therapists and coaches and wellness people went online, and we got a lot of influencers that are talking about therapy in a way that never happened, right? That has not happened now. And I think the stigma is going down, but I think it's going down for women faster. Where you have a lot of these like mom influencers or therapist influencers, and they're targeting women, and they're saying, "Hey, go to therapy," or what they're saying oftentimes is, send your husband or send your partner, your boyfriend to therapy. Like he needs therapy. There's a shadow side of that where a lot of diagnoses like narcissistic personality disorder or borderline personality disorder or bipolar are getting thrown around, and they're becoming like common parlance when these are like significant mental illnesses, and not every man is narcissistic, right? And not every woman is borderline. That's a different conversation. But the stigma is going down. But what we're trying to do at Men's Therapy Online, I encourage your listeners, go to the website, menstherapy.online, and just look at the branding, because we are taking like heavy metal and punk rock and fantasy aesthetics and applying it to psychotherapy. And I think that's a little bit of our secret sauce, is that we're trying to make, I think we're succeeding ultimately, to make therapy cool for men. If you go to that website, you'll see that our splash screen is like a demon. It's like a giant flame demon, and there's like a little silhouette, right? And our tagline is like, face your inner demons. And it's just cool. I mean, obviously I'm biased because I create that piece of art with AI, by the way. It's a lot of it's AI art, but like, it's so different from a typical therapist webpage. When you look at a therapist webpage, it's like, a river, or like a set of stacked stones, or like somebody crying, right? Or a rainbow. And I think for a lot of like dudes, and I mean by dudes, like specifically like masculine, just dudes, right? They look at that page and they're like, I want nothing to do with this. This looks weak. This looks lame. This looks like I'm just going to sit and cry for an hour and I'm not going to get anything done. But when they see like a guy killing a demon, they're like, okay, this is pretty legit. And I bring up a lot, I probably brought up in our pre-conversation, the brand Liquid Death, right? Which is like water. It's just water, but like the can is like heavy metal. They get a lot of heavy metal, album artists. They get a lot of, tattoo artists to do these different can designs, and it's cool. And they made water cool, right? And it's like a status symbol to drink water, and it's just water, right? But like we're the same thing. We're taking something that's like healthy, that's good for you, and we're giving it like a really slick brand, which I think appeals to men a lot more than the typical healthcare, branding.
Oh, that's great. And part of our conversation too is your adoption of AI, and you just mentioned it. You're on the cutting edge. Probably with your background in computer science or your start there, right? And transitioning into growing the business. You mentioned that you're building an in-house AI companion for men's therapy online. How do you envision AI integrating with and enhancing virtual, mental health care, particularly for men who may be hesitant to engage with a human therapist?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'll say quickly from a business point of view, I think AI is a incredible force multiplier for small business. It truly allows me to compete and punch above my weight class, and I'm really, really grateful for that tool and have put a lot of time like learning and taking courses and watching tons of YouTube videos. Like, I think if you're a small business practitioner or a solo practitioner, like do it. Don't be afraid of it. It helps me with a ton of stuff. But as far to answer your question directly around telehealth, is like, how do I say this? For mental health, I think what's going to happen is that AI is going to be a major like um, artificial selection process, right? So not natural selection, but artificial selection. And what I mean by that is, there's like a spectrum of mental health providers, just like there is with any job. And it's kind of taboo to talk about, but I'm going to talk about it. Where it's like some of us are bad at our job, right? If you're going to do statistically, 50% of us are bad at our job, right? There's 50% that are below average, 50% that are above average, right? I think the 50% that are bad at our job are going to get really quickly replaced by AI. And the way the mental health industry works is that there's kind of like a few different tiers. So the first tier, which is what people mostly think about mental health, is something like a mental hospital, right? Or a rehab or an IOP program, something that really works with what we call in the industry like high acuity patients, right? People that have significant diagnoses and struggle to function in daily life, right? That need to be hospitalized. That's not going anywhere, right? Because that you need to be in person, you need to be managed, you need to be hooked up to vitals and go through detox and have meds controlled. Like we're nowhere near that with AI to manage something like that, right? You then also have the high end, which is what we are and what we're continuing to be, which is a very boutique, customized service, right? Where it's very specific to people that are high functioning, but that want the best in class. And a lot of our people, we've, over 10 years of experience, right? But what they want is they want these new technologies and AIs integrated into it. And I'll talk about that in a moment. But the point I'm trying to make here is that middle part, right? The general therapist, right? The person that either is really strictly following like a curriculum, something like CBT or DBT or ACT. These are kind of like acronyms, but they're curriculum-based mental health treatment, right? Or what I like to call kind of tongue-in-cheek, like a validation therapist. A therapist that just kind of agrees with you all the time, and a lot of men bounce off of that. AI, I think, is going to replace that. I think it is actively replacing that, right? Because think about it. If it's like, okay, you want to deliver a curriculum, the computer is going to do that way better than a human. The computer is never going to miss a module. They're never going to, forget something. They're going to make sure they spend enough time on everything. It's very repeatable. You can ask the AI questions forever about the content, and it's never going to get frustrated, right? Like you can tailor it specifically to you. There's a lot of really great and developing AI education platforms where, you're taking tests and the AI is learning how you learn, and it can adapt. It can make it more visual or more auditory or more experiential. It can adapt the way that it's teaching you based on how you learn. Like shit, man. Like humans can't do that, right? Like I think the AI excels at delivering educational information, right, in a way that is custom tailored to somebody who wants to learn. And then we talk about that validation therapist bucket. AI, I mean, that's one of the problems with people using AI as a therapist, especially ChatGPT, is if you don't train it and you don't prompt it, it will disagree with you no matter what. And you know, so, I mean, I see you like snickering, and I know when I was first using ChatGPT, every question I asked, it's like, what a great question. You're a genius. Like like only the real ones ask those types of questions. And like it just agrees with you and fluffs you up. And like, that's helpful for some people, but there's so much more to therapy than that. But I do think it's going to wipe out kind of that like middle part. And I'll talk about how we're integrating AI, but I'm curious if you have any thoughts about kind of the market shift, because I think that is a whole topic in of itself.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's hard to keep up with it. I mean, AI is
Yeah.
here and it's learning and growing exponentially every day. I mean, the changes that I'm seeing on my end, it's just hard to keep up with all the changes. We're talking about AI agents now being developed by anyone. Just
Mhm.
get a mini Mac, mini Mac and start setting up AI agents to do whatever you want,
Yeah.
right? So go gather data, go trade, go, make a business. I've heard so many different stories now about that happening. And, the one thing that you mentioned too is, in this particular space, it's available 24/7, 365.
Mhm.
Right. Your therapist, you can't call them up and say, hey, man, I'm having a hard time today. So, having that virtual therapist, if you will, could be very beneficial in preventing some bad situations probably from happening, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Like for crisis support, it's great. Again, it's infinitely patient. So again, if someone is in a bad place, right? I mean, think about it. Like I remember my first breakup, right? And I was like, whatever, 17 years old. And I couldn't stop talking about this breakup. And I have to imagine that everyone around me was like, oh my God, shut up. This is so annoying. You're 17 years old. You broke up with your high school girlfriend. Like, can it? But for me, it was the worst thing that's ever happened to me in my life, right? But like, in AI, I can talk to about that forever, right? And when you're in a state of mental distress, whether that be anxiety or depression, and you're just like iterating and you're looping and you're just going over and over again, something that has infinite patience and is available forever as long as you want, also that doesn't require anything of you, literally, right? Like it's not a relationship. You don't need anything. You don't need to do anything for it. So you can just kind of just feed it and just keep talking to it over and over again. For someone in that crisis state, I think it's actually really helpful, and it can be more available than a human can, right? And it can be cleaner, often than a human can. It's also free, right? I mean, shit. Like, how do you compete with a free service? ChatGPT is free. Claude, which is I think ChatGPT right now is the better one. It's the more conversational one. But with you said AI agents, people are starting to make on Claude co-working and Claude Code like these AI agents that are able to, surpass ChatGPT as far as technical prowess. I think ChatGPT has the best like language model so far, where it feels kind of natural. But I think Claude will pass it pretty soon. All that being said, is like, I think it is a beneficial. It's like infinite. It's free, and it's whenever you want it. It's like that's a tough thing to compete with. Which I guess the pivot is like why we're making our own. Built on ChatGPT, we might pivot to Claude, but right now we're kind of testing, making our own AI kind of like co-therapist, right? Because like I said, there are some limitations. For instance, like it does tend to agree with people more than they need to. It doesn't really challenge you. Um, and it can be really scattered in what it pulls from. It doesn't have like a clinical foundation or like a school of thought. So what we're doing, simply is like prompting it, right? Developing really intricate prompts. We're talking multiple pages worth of prompts. I've been online and been a content creator for like about 5 years. So I have like so many blogs, I have so many podcast episodes. So I'm feeding it all that data, all the transcripts, all the blogs I've written, and just starting to train it, ask it questions, refine the prompt. What's cool about AI too is that it can iterate on itself. You can say, hey, what should I add to the prompt to make you better? And it will keep doing that. And then we're looking at some partnerships of developing basically a platform where, say you're working with me as a therapist and I'm not available, right? I'm with my wife and my child, but you're talking to the AI, then I would have the ability as your therapist to go in and read the transcripts or get an AI summary, right? Be able to correct anything that maybe is not said, and be able to, bring it up in our next session. So I think like that's the idea of what we're moving towards, is this kind of like co-treatment where like you do have a 24/7 thing that you can interact with, but then you're still meeting with that person, you're meeting with, you're getting kind of like the expert dose in your hour long session a week. But you're integrating all the AI stuff, right? And there already is out there. We just haven't integrated yet. Like there's tons of these AI agents that are doing things like habit tracking. Like, hey, you want to stop drinking? The AI can text you every hour. Like, hey, have you drank? Have you drank? Have you drank? Right? Like a human's not going to be able to do that reliably. If you're trying to lose some weight or you're trying to, I don't know, start meditating, right? There's like all these kind of behavioral change platforms that are run by AI that can be so much more consistent than a human can be and can really amplify what a therapist is able to do. So now, talk about telehealth, you have the solo practitioner or the private practitioner that all of a sudden has the resources of a larger program, right? They have all these AI agents that are able to do a lot of the management and skills education and accountability that would only really be possible in like a mental hospital setting. And as a client, you're getting all this extra value and all this extra support structure basically for free, And it's like, okay, yeah, it's the AI doing it, but like in some ways that's better. And two, it's like you're not having to pay for going to rehab, right? You're able to do it with all these other supports at a much more accessible and affordable rate.
Yeah. Some of the challenges, are also innovation in that virtual men's health, and you mentioned many of them before. So in terms of even finding new patients to serve, you mentioned before, hey, you've tried a bunch of different things. I've tried paid ads, not really effective for therapy. Those paid ads are more for impulse buys. How has that kind of realization, your own lessons learned through your journey, led you to pivot towards getting traffic and, other ways of which to get men to feel comfortable to actually reach out and get help for themselves?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, you alluded to that. Yeah, I lost like easily $25,000 like a couple years ago on paid ads. And yeah, what I was telling you, and I'll say, for the recording is like, I think ads really work for like a cool service, and like therapy is not cool, right? Like you go to therapy when you're like sad and when you need help. Or what I think is changing and what we're trying to do at Men's Therapy Alliance, like when you want to become better and you want to self-improve. But for most people, it's like at a dark point in their life is when they call us. So seeing an ad is not that cool about it, right? People want to see ads for like boats and like four-wheelers and vacations, not like going to mental health treatment. That was an expensive mistake. But what I found to be effective is kind of just like providing a lot of value, and we do that through our podcast. That's the Men's Therapy Podcast. Through our blogs, we have a free Slack community, which I can talk about. That's kind of probably a separate topic of how we're leveraging technology. But we have a lot of we have an online course. We have a lot of ways that guys can plug in and start getting value for zero money and being anonymous, right? I've had people that listen to my show for 2 years that are just getting value, getting value, getting value, and then the shit hits the fan. They get a divorce, they have a night where they drink too much and say some dumb shit. A kid confronts them about something, and then because we've been having kind of a relationship, a parasocial relationship, but a relationship, like they call us, right? Because they know that we are experts. We know what we're talking about. They've connected with me through, the content or one of my, therapists that work for me. So I found that it's helpful just to like kind of be in people's, mind so that when stuff does happen, that's who they end up calling. What I'm doing now, and AI will actually be helping in this, to be honest, is doing more outreach. So there are some emerging AI tools that are able to take things like Reddit posts, X posts, Facebook posts. We're actually going to be also looking at 4chan and looking for keywords and patterns and actually identifying individuals that may need support. Right. So we're talking about, and I'm sure all of you have someone that on Facebook that posts some whack shit, right? That's, and whack is maybe too judgmental, but like, they're posting like a lot of pain, right? They're posting about a divorce that they're not yet over, and they're just like, railing on their ex, right? Or they're posting a lot of pictures of being drunk and then a lot of like weird texts about, when they are intoxicated, about all the regrets that they have. There's some people that post things that, are suicide threats, right? Or self-harm threats, right? There's like a lot of people, because of how anonymous the internet is, that post kind of some dark stuff. So what we're going to be doing this year is finding those people and actually reaching out to them. It may work, it may not. I don't know. It's a gamble, but using things like AI to find them and then connecting them with our therapists, with some of our ambassadors, with people that are using some of our AI bot that we talked about to like offer some education and support, and then get them connected with some of our other free community things. So, and I think business wise, that's where it's going. I don't think like just social media posting is enough anymore because it's so loud out there and there's so much content that now we have to kind of level up the arms race and go towards engagement, right? And really like
Mhm.
going directly to the source and using the old kind of therapy adage, like meeting our clients where they're at, right? Meeting them instead of expecting them to find us, right? We have to go for them directly.
Right. Yeah. And you mentioned some other kind of unique ways and things that you're doing in the background, like developing some curriculum groups for like divorced dads, bringing on some associate coaching individuals, recent grads, so you can offer maybe a lower price point for some folks who maybe don't have the financial means to go for the full-on professional right away. How do these new offerings expand your reach and make virtual healthcare more accessible while still maintaining your quality standards?
Yeah, for sure. So, the first thing I kind of alluded to it earlier that I think is a big telehealth thing is that we use Slack, which for those not familiar, it's kind of like it's a chat room. We have a confidentiality agreement with it, so it's all confidential and people can use fake names. It's like Microsoft Teams. Most people are familiar with Teams. So we have a Slack channel that's free, and we're up to about 300 people on there now, 300 guys that are just talking about men's mental health stuff, and it's like any forum, right? There's like a handful of people that are active. Most people are just kind of reading. Some people are like lurking, but we're starting to create these digital spaces where guys can start to be more honest about what they're going through and get support from other peers, which is critical, because a therapist on some level, it's ultimately fake. And I say this, you're still paying for it, right? And like we're trained, we're professionals, we're here to help. But I think for a guy that has a good bullshit detector, there is always going to be a non-zero amount of bullshit between that relationship, just because of the nature of the industry and the transaction, right? But when you're getting feedback from another guy, from another peer who like isn't getting paid, frankly, right? You trust it more, so we're taking things that again that mental hospitals and rehab programs, it's called a milieu, right? Which is like you're just hanging out with other people in the program and you're learning and you're growing and you're making relationships. You're getting that milieu experience or that group experience online for free in your pocket 24/7, right? We know by research that the milieu is often more powerful than the therapy sessions when you look at rehab and mental health treatment, right? It's the connections between the other people. The therapist is there to facilitate it, so we're able to do that virtually and make that accessible for people, and that's awesome, right? We're also with things like the podcast where there's some people that okay, you're not ready to talk, but like you can tune in every week and listen to therapists and other experts talk about stuff like this and then get that dose of good positive mental health stuff, and education. You talked about the curriculum groups where, some guys, okay, maybe you can't commit to a long-term group. I get it. Especially if you're a divorced dad, shit, like you're busy and money is probably not coming out of your pockets. So like, let's develop like a 12-week targeted thing where it's very specific, it's very focused, it's with one of our expert therapists, and this is the part that jazzes me up being a business owner, is creating these services and just having an idea and being like, is this going to work? And it might not, I don't know. But like, that's like the fun part for me is like experimenting and seeing where we can meet guys where we're at and really changing what people think therapy is by offering all these different formats, right? And finding like, if you're a guy struggling, you come to us, there is some place that you can plug in, right? And there's a lot of stuff for free. There's a lot of stuff that, is done asynchronously because we know guys are busy. And we just want to be sure that we're providing something for everybody. And you can engage as little or as much as you want. And that's cool. And I think being a telehealth practice gives me that flexibility to be able to try out more creative ways of offering therapy.
Yeah, yeah, that's one of the things that really impressed me about your service, your site, is there's so many different avenues for people to plug into. To your point is, and when they have that low point, they know that they've already developed a relationship somehow, right? To
Right.
actually reach out, which is fantastic because that's probably the hardest first step for any one of your patients, I'm sure.
Hmm.
So kind of pivoting to the future, right? In terms of, what do you really think are the biggest opportunities and challenges for telehealth and that virtual care in the in the landscape over the next, 6 to 12 months?
Yeah. So this 12 months is an interesting time frame, but my initial thought, and I'll say this, on recording, because I think it's true, is that telehealth therapy is worse than in-person therapy, you know? And that's me saying this as a teleprovider. I think sitting face to face with someone to do traditional talk therapy is more effective because you're getting that, it feels like a more real connection, right? You're able to, I think people emote a lot better when they're in person, right? Like they cry or they get angry a lot better because it's more real, it's more immediate, right? I think what my challenge is and will continue to be, and what the industry's challenge will be, okay, if you're going to be telehealth, then leverage the things that make telehealth special so that we can make it better than in-person treatment, And all the stuff I talked about, I won't go over it again, but again, Slack channel, podcast, courses, I think the industry or the people that want to pivot need to leverage these technology platforms instead of just being like kind of a worse version of what they already are, you know? And I think that's where I think a lot of people mess up in mental health. I have a lot of friends that are personal trainers, and similarly, right? It's like if you're just doing personal training online and you don't use any of the technology, it's way worse than doing it in person, But if you do it online and use these tools and use AI stuff and really make it a unique, its own product, it can be better. So I think our industry just needs to, like, if you want to go telehealth, you got to go all the way and you got to stand out instead of just being, again, like a slightly worse version of what you already offer.
Yeah, yeah. So Mark, very interesting perspective, very entrepreneurial. So for other people trying to follow in your footsteps, right, and innovate in this space, what have been your key lessons learned that you'd like to share with that audience as well?
Oh, so many lessons, so many lessons. I mean, and when I'm saying that, laughing because it also means it's like a lot of mistakes, right? So I think something that I've more or less figured out is learning how to be good at being bad at stuff, you know, and learning that like part of the learning process is failing, and not just failing. There's like a psychological piece of like feeling stupid, looking at something and just being like, I have no idea what I'm doing and I have no idea if this is going to work, and I'm probably going to mess it up, but I'm going to try it anyway. I think however you get there, whether that's therapy, coaching, education, like being able to just take risks, controlled risks, but take risks, I think is critical for entrepreneurship. I think another thing that I say, because I also do supervise other therapists and help people build businesses and stuff, but like one thing I say to all of them is, if you're a health practitioner, for me it's mostly mental health. If you're a health practitioner, I think so many practitioners will spend so much time and money on continuing education, right? And they get better technically, which is great, right? Like I'm not advocating against that. Like you got to stay on top of it. But they'll, these therapists, and I'm one of them. Like we'll spend thousands of dollars going to a retreat to learn something, or to get a CEU about a new modality coming out, or to do our own therapy and really, hone our own professional and personal lives, which is awesome. But what we won't spend money on, which is crazy to me, is business education or sales. So I recommend, like, if you really want to be entrepreneurial and you really want to learn this stuff, like get off your high horse, frankly, and like take a sales class. Like, be in there with like real estate agents and insurance salespeople and car salespeople, like learn sales. And if you want to build a business, like there's so many like MBA, you don't have to get an MBA. I don't have an MBA, but there's so many MBA like courses and content. You can ask AI to teach you for one, right? And for me, it was YouTube. I used a lot of YouTube early on, and now I use a lot of AI. But it's like really trying to learn these other adjacent skills just as seriously as you do trying to learn and improve your clinical skills. And I think there is a major barrier to that in a lot of healthcare. I don't quite understand it, but it's something that I think as an industry we need to get better and realize that we're not like above a sales training, and we're not above a public speaking training, and we're not above learning about investors or learning how to do taxes, right? I mean, that's just stuff that every business owner has to do, and we are also business owners.
Mark, very insightful and new perspectives, very entrepreneurial ways of approaching telehealth and mental health for men. Really appreciate having you on the call. I know you mentioned it earlier, but for patient, potential patients or clients, how can they get in touch with you? How can they get some of your services, the Slack channel, engage with those podcasts? What pathway would you offer them?
Yeah, everything's at the website. So that's menstherapy.online. Like I mentioned, tons of free stuff. I guess if you want to pay to work with us, there's that too. But I encourage you to get on the podcast, get on the Slack, just check out what we have to offer. And more so, because I imagine this is mostly targeted at other professionals, check out my website and steal my shit. I'm telling you, take it. It's all open source. It's all open source, right? What I'm doing is working. And the more people that are doing stuff that works out there, the happier I am, right? There's no real competition. There's tons of people that can use our help and use our support. So use me as a case study if you're a professional and trying to figure out what's possible. Take a look, but everything is, menstherapy.online.
That's awesome. Well, thanks again, Mark. And for everyone else, greatly appreciate you dropping by. And we'll wrap it up from here. Have a great day.
Great. Thank you.